Okay. Hi, everybody. My name is Adele Flynn, and I'm the chairwoman of the Center for Food Innovation. Thank you for joining us for Food Innovation in Northeast Ohio. Why here? Why now? This is the sixth and final webinar in our series, and I thank you all for joining us. Today's session is titled, How Can Northeast Ohio Harness New Policy, Research, and Funding to Accelerate Our Food Economy? Please keep in mind that during this webinar, only the panelists and hosts have open mics and videos. However, I welcome all of our attendees online to utilize the chat box by introducing yourself and letting us know why you've joined us today. Feel free to use the chat box to ask any questions you have throughout the webinar, and we'll take some time at the end to answer them. So, the Center for Food Innovation is modeled after the Food Valley, located in the Netherlands. In 2005, they founded a nonprofit that served as an innovative bridge in the development of a fully integrated food cluster. Within 15 years, from 2005 to 2015, it became the second largest agricultural exporter in the world next to the United States. These exports consist of horticulture, food, and technology. The Center for Food Innovation, in partnership with Lorain County Community College, is hosting the six-part series with the intent to inspire discussion and actions focused on advanced agricultural and food industry innovation as an economic development opportunity for the region, supporting local farmers, spurring business growth, propelling entrepreneurial startups, and increasing job growth across a range of industries. A report titled The 25% Shift found that if we increase food production from its current 5% of demand to 25% of demand, we could increase jobs significantly, generate $4.2 billion in annual regional output, and produce up to $126 million in annual state and local taxes. Not to mention providing Ohioans with more access to healthy, fresh, and locally grown foods year-round. At each webinar, we will award one copy of Richard Munson's book, Tech to Table, to a guest participating in the live event. An email announcement will be sent out following the webinar announcing the winner. And I'm gonna apologize because I'm a full-time farmer of cattle and it is fly season. So if you see me swinging around, it's because I have flies in my house and I have fly swatter for when it gets annoying. Now let me introduce to you our speakers. Joining us today are Brandon Kern, Senior Director of State and National Policy for the Ohio Farm Bureau Federation, Tim Derrickson, Senior Director of Food and Agribusiness for Jobs Ohio, Dr. Cherry Kubota, Professor in the Department of Horticulture and Crop Sciences and the Director of the Ohio Controlled Environment Agriculture Center at The Ohio State University. We are also joined by Vera Watts, CEO, Brett Joseph, COO, and Madison Letizia from the Center for Food Innovation. Unfortunately, Congresswoman Marcy Kaptur had prior commitments and was unable to join us today. However, she was gracious enough to record the following video for us.
Good afternoon to all stewards of Mother Earth gathered for this insightful panel focused on unleashing Ohio's agricultural potential. At the southernmost edge of the largest body of surface fresh water anywhere on Earth, the fertile soil beneath our feet blesses us with the ability to nourish and feed ourselves. And our central location at the crossroads of critical hubs for land, sea, rail, and air provide us the opportunity to reach across and feed the nation as well. For Ohio, agriculture isn't a subset of our way of life. It is the ground from which our entire economy and society grows. As a region and state, the question we face is how do we innovate agriculture for tomorrow? Currently, only 5% of what we consume regionally is sourced locally. The remaining 95% is imported from somewhere else. We're sending billions of our dollars across the nation and abroad to import food instead of spending those dollars right here at home where we could grow jobs in the economy. It doesn't have to be this way. We must recapture our marketplace. And that is why I'm so excited by the focus on the 25% shift. Establishing Northern Ohio as an agricultural hub would revolutionize the region and improve every facet of daily life. Bolstering local agricultural capacity will empower more farmers, support good-paying jobs, and connect everyone with fresh, healthy food made and grown by neighbors located just down the road. To that end, as a member of the House Agriculture Committee, I'm working on the proposed 2023 Farm Bill to propel American agricultural excellence forward. This includes standing up workforce development programs to train the next generation of growers, ensuring federal food contracts include set-asides for local farmers, expanding the Farmers Market Nutrition Program, and investing in urban farming, supply chain resilience, and innovative agricultural technology and practices for our modern era. Ohio possesses many of the assets and skill sets necessary to bring about the agricultural shift we need. But it is strong collaboration between all our partners, farmers, private and public sector entities, small businesses, customers, and more. That is the key that will unlock our transformation. The future of agriculture is being birthed in Ohio right here, right now. This is a future where local sourcing isn't an anomaly. It becomes the norm. You are all engaged in the strategic mission of creating a better, brighter future for us all. I applaud your tireless work to create a more connected, more sustainable, and more resilient and healthy food system that lifts everyone up, from the beginning of the food chain to the very end. I often say that what Ohio makes and grows Ohio. Together, we will revolutionize agriculture all across the land, and I look forward to the endless possibilities that are right around the corner. Thank you all so very much.
Now I'm going to ask each of you, our panelists, to give a brief introduction and explanation of what your work and organization means for year-round production in North Ohio. So we'll start off with Brandon.
Well, thanks so much, Adele, and everybody. Appreciate the opportunity to be here today. I'm Brandon Kern. As Adele said, I serve as Senior Director for State and National Policy for the Ohio Farm Bureau. If you're not familiar with the Ohio Farm Bureau, it's the largest general farm organization in the state of Ohio. So we represent growers of all sizes and scale, and all different types of production methods and commodities. So everything from what most would call your conventional agriculture, row crop production, to specialty crop growers across the state of Ohio. So it's an honor to be here. I've been with Ohio Farm Bureau for about 8 years now. My background is in public policy. So prior to coming to Ohio Farm Bureau, I spent a number of years with our General Assembly in Ohio as a policy staffer and advisor to members of the legislature. Also spent some time working for former U.S. Senator George Voinovich. So I was fortunate enough to gain a great perspective in policy making and lawmaking at both the state and federal level before I came to Farm Bureau. We live in my wife and our 3 kids live in Fairfield County, Ohio, which is we live in a small community called Amanda, Ohio, which is about 35 miles south of Columbus, and we live right on my wife's family farm here in Fairfield County, row crop operation. So excited for the conversation today, and really appreciate being a part of your panel.
Thank you, Brandon. We'll go ahead with Tim.
Thanks, Adele. And it's nice to join you all today. Brief background, those cows behind me I milked for 30 years, first 30 years of my life. My family started a couple of businesses following the getting out of the dairy operation, but we continue to farm our farm. Served in the state legislature for 8 years, where involved with a number of things. Agriculture and workforce development were primarily the subject matter of legislation that I introduced. Following that, I went to the Department of Agriculture during the Kasich administration, last few years of while Kasich was governor, as assistant director, ended his term as interim director. And I stayed on up until a couple years ago in the DeWine administration when I left to come over to Jobs Ohio, and I'm now serving as managing director of the food and agricultural sector. So Jobs Ohio is the business development or economic development arm for the state. We are not a state agency. We receive no funds from the state budget or from taxes. We are funded through the liquor enterprise, quite literally. We purchased the liquor enterprise through legislation 10 years ago when we were created. So that's our revenue source. And all those revenues in turn that are generated through those sales, we use offer as incentives to business growth and development here in the state. The ag and food sector is a very active sector, and I'm sure we'll engage more in that conversation, but it's pretty vital to Ohio's economy. And it's nice to be involved in all aspects, from the farm to the retail shelves of the food industry. And we're quite busy. We were quite busy last year. Well, actually a banner year for us as far as companies in this sector who have made investments and created jobs. And as of today, the pipeline looks pretty healthy as well. So that's me and Jobs Ohio. Thanks, Adele.
Seems that Adele's having some signal challenges. So Terry, would you like to then share a little bit about yours and present your slideshow?
Sure. So I'm Cherry Kubota. I'm the director of the Ohio Controlled Environment Agriculture Center at the Ohio State University. I grew up in super urban Tokyo, and then came to US. I married to Ohioan, and then we are living in Columbus, but our in-law is actually in Northeast Ohio. So I'm very much connected to Ohio and glad to be here. So I'd like to have a few minutes of doing presentations so that gives some, better understanding of what we do at the Ohio State University. So let me start my presentation. So for those who are not familiar with controlled environment agriculture, this is a crop production under controlled environment. In controlled environment, you can create optimum environment to grow plants. So you can do off-season or year-round food crop production, not just food, but any plants you want to grow can go into controlled environment. Because of the optimum conditions, you can get high yield and high quality and consistent quality, which is very different from open field outdoor production. And then you can reduce the resource and then increase the efficiency. And then it is a great system for local production and urban agriculture. And then controlled environment can be used for different types of production systems, including vertical farming and greenhouse and simple structure like high tunnels too. All right, you may not be familiar with Northeastern Ohio was referred to as greenhouse capital of America many, many years ago, but 80s and 90s industry shifted more for ornamental crop. And then now we have more addition of food crop production after 2010. And then that movement actually spoke to Ohio State. And then Ohio State started developing more effort to expand that capacity of research and education outreach in a controlled environment, not just floriculture crop species, but also food crop. So one of the things we started recently is creating this center, Ohio Controlled Environment Agriculture Center. We abbreviate as OHCEAC and we pronounce OCEAC. OCEAC is very strong team of 21 faculty members, including USDA affiliated scientists and engineers. And then we are all spectrum. So all kinds of areas relevant to CEA, horticulture, crop science, engineering, plant pathology, entomology, 2-year college for workforce development, extension, human nutrition, everything under the category of controlled environment agriculture. And then the concept of this center is to do a collaborative research to assist the industry to move forward. So those are the faces of 21 scientists. Again, all kinds of areas. We are so proud of having this capacity. And then Ohio State is also investing to build a great facility to do more relevant research to the industry. So the pretty much Dutch style, modern greenhouse facilities, 23 feet to the gutter, glass, and then also modern material called ETFE covered. And then we can do research now relevant, to the industry doing controlled environment agriculture. The total area of the greenhouse is probably, let's say, less than half acre. So it's a micro scale compared to the current industry scale, but compared to university standard, it's much, much bigger facility. So I'm very much proud of having this because nobody else in US in terms of universities, have this capacity. So just a footprint showing, but basically what we have in the greenhouse is something like this kind of, tomato production, this kind of leafy green production, this kind of berry production. We will be able to do that almost similar way as current high-tech greenhouses are doing. So I think that's all my presentations, and then I have a listed websites here, what I contribute through research and extension, but I stop my presentation here and then continue the program. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Adele is having some technology problems, so I'm going to just sort of pick up the baton here. So thank you all very much. Obviously, we've got policy, we've got economic development, and we've got research here, and I'd like to ask some questions. About where would you like to see the level of local food production in Northeast Ohio being within the next 10 years? And that's a question for anybody, actually, for all of you.
Well, I'll jump in here. I guess I'll speak as a parent. One of the things that Amy and I look for our kids is the ability to provide a nutritious and wholesome food to them, and certainly we utilize a local farm market here as much as we possibly can here at home, and we'd like to be able to do that. I think the challenge with local food production is one of affordability for some people. I think the challenge for this sector is to create efficiencies within the sector in which cost savings and affordability then can be passed on to the consumer, because I think the limits of it are the accessibility of it right now is growing for sure, but it's still limited to a number of people based on affordability. And I think there's a lot of opportunity to do that. Technology, certainly, I think Dr. Kubota could probably talk about all the technology involved in this sector that will, I think, allow that to happen. So I think it's going to continue to grow, but it's going to grow to the extent that the market's going to direct it where to be, right? Consumers, we all know that there's an increasing desire amongst consumers to have access to local food. That trend's been growing for quite some time, but it's got to be a matter of filling those, both sides of the coin there. I think for a lot of consumers, it's nutritious and a wholesome food supply, but it also has to be affordable. We as a country are very fortunate. We have a very efficient food supply system, and the result of that is that Americans pay one of the lowest percentages of their annual income towards their food of any place in the world. And so that has to be, I think that expectation will continue amongst consumers. And so, building efficiencies within this sector is something that will continue, but needs to continue if it's going to grow.
So you talked about price as being a barrier, let's say, for the growth of the market. Two questions here, and this might be something that Tim can step in, and I don't know, but where can we address the price issues? And what other barriers do we see to growing a larger local food system in Northeast Ohio? And I should say local being year-round food system.
I'll chime in, and Brandon, I concur with everything you shared, and I love talking about the CEA industry and the investments that are being made, and I want to also say to Dr. Kubota, I really see you are definitely the expert, and I'm somewhat reserved in sharing because you are so ingrained in this industry. My perspective is one of investment. And as a business development person, I like Brandon has shared, I just see this industry continuing to grow. But like Brandon said, there are some challenges, and being cost efficient is one of them. I spent a few days with this industry. It was late last year, and the conversation was fascinating to me. And I am thoroughly convinced that this industry, this business, is here to stay. The demand is just so high. The question, and I think the industry struggles with this to some degree, is those means of identity. Do they identify themselves as farmers or as IT people? Because it really takes both. It's a true marriage. And so I think we're going to see, this is my perspective, and Dr. Kubota, you please correct me if you feel like differently than I do, but I see an evolution here with this industry, and that we won't see fewer facilities. I think we're going to continue to see these folks raising money and building out and adding additional spaces. But I think we're going to see folks kind of focus on whether they are truly a farmer or they are a provider of service or IT to those farmers. They need to kind of specialize to some degree. And I think that's what's going to evolve over time. And I think that is what will drive that efficiency over time. It simply needs to happen. But that's the industry itself speaking. And at least that was my takeaway from the few days that I had spent with them.
If I may add something, it's very true. I don't disagree at all. But one thing I like to point out, if you aim year-round production in Northeast Ohio or any location in Ohio, you have to incorporate some sort of controlled environment agriculture. And then controlled environment agriculture is a high input, high output type of production. And then extreme case is really the vertical farms. And then because vertical farms are sort of right now investor driven, so that's why they have to go much, much higher technology to introduce the investors' interest. But great thing happening is, giving a different perspective of crop production. So attracting young people, attracting those who are, who used to not interested so much in agriculture. So now they are fascinated about the idea of food production in urban setting. So there are pros and cons. However, I don't think the vertical farms are going to replace all the food production ever. But to answer the first question, how much of the local food happening in Ohio, I think it's going to be mix of traditionally produced food, still kept, imported from outside of the state, and controlled environment, different technology levels, including high tunnel, including greenhouse and vertical farms, all together giving varieties of options for food to select. So some of the produce are very much high value crop, and then superior quality, super tasty, but relatively more expensive, and some of the crops are more affordable. So I think that is what I want to see in Ohio.
What I'm hearing, which is really interesting, I think the jobs that we're hearing in the research reflect not only this new form of farming, but all the technology companies or technology skill sets that will support this. And in terms of the inputs and outputs, a lot of the highest level inputs, as I understand it, is energy inputs. And so some of the cost variables seem to potentially have the potential to change as that dynamic changes. As we begin to have more renewable energy, and we can have more locally produced energy, or energy that, where systems are completely self-sufficient energy-wise, that cost will go down significantly. There's, other inputs that are eliminated because of this. It's significantly less water, or less, pesticides and that kind of thing. But I also agree with you that this is only a portion of the equation. We need to have a hybrid. We need to have our field-based farming as well as this added element. It just is this, that having year-round capabilities provides us, or the indoor CEA enables us to have the year-round farming capabilities that we don't, as a northern area, have the capabilities of. It seems that Adele is back online, and so I want to pass back the baton to Adele to continue with some of our questions.
Well, you guys get to witness some of the challenges that we have in rural America with rural broadband. So jumping in along those same lines, what types of new technology and systems do you foresee Northeast Ohio utilizing or developing to meet the type of need that, with the issues that I'm having in food production in general? And I'm going to apologize. I'm going to try and jump on from my iPad that has cell service.
So I can start. So one of the technologies I think very important for controlled environment agriculture are, number one, some kind of grower assistant or grower assistance technologies. So you build facility, but now most of the companies struggle to fill the positions, educated growers who can make educated decisions in terms of growing practice or selecting technologies. We need to have some kind of assisting technologies. And then now people are talking about AI, people demonstrated AI is actually helping. And then that kind of technology or new approach is quite important. And then at the same time, sort of mechanical automation type of approach is important, so that the jobs created in CEA are not necessarily low-end worker type of jobs, but more like an educated people job. So those two, I think it's very important.
Yeah, you've seen this in other segments of agriculture, right? We've had an explosion in the use of technology in our industry over the years, and one of the most amazing things that I've seen in this job is, and I would highly recommend anyone attending the webinar today, if you ever get a chance to visit a robotic dairy, go check out a robotic dairy. So the cows wear collars. There's a sensor on the collar, and that collar is monitoring everything from the health of the animal, the diet of the animal, how much they're consuming, the milk production associated with that animal, the technology surrounding, the actual milking process itself is all automated. It's run through robotics, and these systems are so sophisticated that it can literally analyze the quality of the milk for that specific animal, and can identify nutritional supplements that are needed for that specific animal, which allows a producer to enhance the supplements that animal gets. That's the type of innovation we've seen in many different segments of the agriculture industry. If you look at traditional row crop farming as another example, precision application is incredibly beneficial for our industry. So now we have machines that can literally measure the nutrient level in the soil as the tractor's going across the farm field, and can change the rate of fertilizer application within a field, not for an entire 50-acre field, but within individual segments of that 50-acre field, will change the rate of the nutrient application going down to specifically meet the need of the soil in that part of the farm field. And I think as we look to this industry, to the controlled environment industry, I think there's a lot of examples that can be extended to utilizing technology to create greater efficiencies, to pass on that cost reduction to consumers, monitoring environmental controls. If you're talking about plants planted in soil, monitoring the soil health, the amount of humidity that's needed to achieve the greatest efficient growth for those plants. So all of that, I think, is applicable to this segment of the industry, just like we've seen in what a lot of people would call the conventional farming segment. So we know that those things will certainly be important, and that investment in those items will be really important. But to Adele's point, I think broadband is another really important tool. We've spent a lot of time as an organization promoting broadband development across Ohio and into underserved areas. And there has been an incredible investment as of late in broadband development. Now the key from a policy perspective is going to make sure that the resources get to the places where they're needed. And so, identifying areas of true need, making sure, particularly in more rural areas, that, we talk a lot about the last mile, making sure that these programs are going to get broadband actually to the farm gate, because a lot of times what we'll see, even when broadband's expanded to rural areas, it'll go down kind of the main thoroughfares. But the farm gate's, a mile off that main thoroughfare a lot of times. And so if you're talking about those really rural areas, ensuring that these resources get to meet that true need is going to be very important too, in terms of broadband development. So I think there's a lot of lessons that can be learned, and a lot of opportunity utilizing technology and broadband to gain those efficiencies and enhancements in this sector for sure.
I think the technology, like's been said, is really is what's driving this industry. The investment is pretty significant. Brandon uses the example of dairy farming, and it's fascinating on the dairy farm. I know this subject this panel isn't necessarily about dairy farming, but not only can we milk cows with robots and feed them, but we can clean up after them too. Imagine a Roomba, a large-scale Roomba, cleaning up behind a cow. And we've got them. And the Waterman farm, where Dr. Kaptur is going to be, and the dairy that's going to be there is going to have that technology. It's just hard to imagine the impact that technology is having on ag, but there's a price tag, and the price tag is significant across all industries. But I do think it's that technology that, not specific to the ag and food sector, really true for every industry. The workforce is a challenge, finding folks to work, but the workforce in these controlled environment facilities is very different. Now, they justifiably consider themselves just as much of a farmer as Brandon and I do. It's just, instead of having cow manure or dirt on our boots, they have a lab coat on. And that's legitimate. It's just a different environment, no pun intended in that sense. But I do think that the interest from the younger generation is going to be driven by two things. One, the desire of healthy food, and two, the interest in technology. And this industry is offering both. So I see it as an advantage, the technology, but it's also, from a startup and operating expense perspective, it's hard because you really kind of need it to be efficient. I can tell you, starting wages in this industry is pretty good. It's higher than what most people would think, but it's because the skill set that's needed to really run these operations is different than maybe some other food and ag operations that I find ourselves investing in. But anyway, I do think the technology is going to drive the subject.
And Sherry, can you go in a little bit more into what role can higher education, play in developing?
Sure. Oh yeah. So as I said, we are developing a relatively large facility, and then we are hoping to educate more students to have experience relevant to industry, so that those are basically ready to work in the commercial setting. Graduate students, we educate in an interdisciplinary research program, So not just traditional horticulture, traditional program, but maybe more understanding or better understanding in engineering concept. So that's really important for CEA industry sector at large, because you can't just function only, knowing only how plants grow, but they need to understand how temperature can be manipulated, how light can be selected, or how HVAC system works. So it's really, and the sensors and everything. So that's really, really needed area to educate.
Perfect. I'm gonna skip around a little bit and go into maybe the policy piece. And Brandon, maybe you can talk a little bit on this, on what kind of resources are out there policy-wise for either groups like the Center for Food Innovation or higher education or even farmers.
Yeah, so I think things to consider on the policy front are tied to some of the challenges that I think the sector faces. One, energy costs are, it was mentioned earlier, and this is true of really any type of agriculture. To be frank, even traditional agriculture, the two largest input costs for all producers are fertilizer and energy. And what we're seeing right now with what's happening in energy markets is a challenge. And so we, as an organization, promote an all of the above energy approach. That includes renewables. And there's been a lot of focus, obviously, on electrifying our power, all forms of power, including vehicles and things like that. But there's got to be public policy has got to facilitate a pragmatic transition to that type of energy economy. And so I see that as a challenge. And if you're looking at the macro level, I think our nation's energy policy is absolutely going to influence how much we can do in this space, because natural gas prices are doing what they're doing right now. It's going to be very difficult. You've got to heat these buildings, and it's very, very expensive to do it. On that front as well, I've talked to a lot of greenhouse operators, and one of the things I think we have to get right, and we're starting to work on more from our perspective, is energy capture. So, and recycling the energy that's created with these facilities and making that financially viable. I think that's a challenge right now. So promoting the idea of creating real financial incentives for decentralized energy production, because greenhouse gases have, or greenhouses have a lot of energy created within their systems that can be recycled. And if they have the ability to effectively and to put that energy back on the grid, for example, there's another viable financial model there that helps support these types of facilities and grow them. So I think energy policy is absolutely probably right at the top of the list. Our logistics and supply chain is incredibly important to this as well. I know we're talking about local food production, and the idea is that we're going to create food production closer to the consumers, and so you might think that logistics and supply chain might not be as important, but I still think it's very important from the standpoint of our processing. We have seen significant challenges. The pandemic, for example, created significant challenges in many different processing sectors. You look at meat processing in particular, but really all segments. And so, policy surrounding logistics and supply chain is incredibly important, and I think a major challenge. And then in agriculture, as mentioned, the role that education can play here. We're in the midst of a generational transition in agriculture. And I think that creates both a challenge for agriculture, but also creates an opportunity for a segment like this. So facilitating that transition, that generational transition in a way that that effectively gets people who may not have been involved in agriculture involved is in the past is very important. And then building that education and awareness is incredibly important. So there was a bill passed by our state legislature recently, a young and beginning farmers tax incentive, for example, that I think is one example of a new policy idea that is attempting to look at helping facilitate that transition. That the whole impetus behind that bill is to provide a tax credit to retiring farmers who seek out those who would qualify to be a young or beginning farmer if they sell or lease part of their farm assets to that beginning farmer. And then for the beginning farmers, if they take a financial management course, teaching them about financial management of an agriculture operation, those young and beginning farmers under this piece of legislation that was just passed is eligible for a tax credit. So looking at financial incentives such as that to encourage the next generation to take a look at agriculture and take a look at it in a different way is going to be important too. And even from an organizational standpoint, we try to do this maybe even outside the policy sector. We have our foundation at Farm Bureau has the Explore Ag program, which provides a camp, essentially a day camp for high school students to go explore STEM-related jobs within the agriculture sector. And I think that type of program is also vitally important to piquing the interest of the next generation to get involved in this.
Okay, great. Well, I'm keeping an eye on the time because I feel like this hour's kind of really flown by. And I see that we are starting to get some questions in. So Madison, do you want to go ahead and start asking some of the questions that have been put out there?
Absolutely. So we're going to start with this first one here. Is from inside of our team. Last week, we heard from Brandon Day from the Yield Lab Institute about ag tech investments. He described St. Louis, along with Silicon Valley, as a strong ag tech ecoregions. And the question here is, what more is needed in Northeast Ohio to make it a strong region, just like Silicon Valley and St. Louis? Is it academics? Is it incubators? What else would we need?
My gut is that all of the above, frankly. You know, the sector is just so strong. $124 billion economic impact annually to the state. That's a pretty significant number when compared to other states, and so anyone in this space, really kind of when you get into the weeds, you see that we not only can raise it, produce it, process, logistically transport all fairly easily based on existing infrastructure. The state finds itself in a pretty attractive position for the entire chain. We've got great educational institutions too, and not only OSU, although they're in a great position, but Central State, another land grant university, has a growing ag program, and I'm a graduate of a community college and a university, at Clark State Community College in ag business, and there's Wilmington, and I could go on and on with our community college network. But I think we've got a very good basis for innovation. We also are home to a number of R&D facilities in this space. Very, very recognizable names too that invested pretty heavily in that R&D space because of their manufacturing facilities that are already here in existence. So I think the more we talk about the industry and the interest from a younger generation's perspective, I do believe that we'll continue to see educational institutions catering with new curriculum to that interest.
Very good. Did anyone else want to jump in on that one before we move on?
Tim's the expert there. I'll leave it to him.
Very fair. Good. We have this next question mentioning, I have not heard any mention of regenerative agriculture as a solution for the high cost of inputs. So this one came just on that last section what we were talking about so we could jump off from there.
Yeah, so, I think we continue to, I think depending on who you talk to, you could hear a lot of different definitions for regenerative agriculture, right? But I think that one of the things, the examples I talked about earlier with the use of technology, ag technology is, in my mind, it's absolutely an example of regenerative agriculture. I talk about the precision application that we're utilizing now within our field. It's allowing farmers to use less fertilizer, improve water quality, and all those things. And so I think we need to take those lessons, and I think the entire industry as a whole is clearly moving in that direction. Again, depending on your definition of that. So it's absolutely part of the equation here for sure. There's no doubt about it.
When I am asked to narrow down the food and ag industry from a business development perspective, and to make it simple, I define food investments as many of the new investments are healthy, not all, but they tend to lean that direction. And from an ag perspective, sustainability is the term I use to define what's happening in the ag, more on the farm practices. We're seeing best management practices being implemented across the board, crop, livestock. You're seeing an agricultural industry that's taking some ownership in the defining of sustainability. I'm real proud of the industry for what they're doing, and they're really taking it on and doing what they can. I mean, they're such good stewards of the land to begin with. And with some encouragement, Governor DeWine was one who provided some H2 Ohio funding for changes in practices, and the lines were long to sign up, not just for those dollars, but to implement changes on their farms to be more sustainable. So regenerative agriculture, sustainable agriculture, we're seeing a lot of activity, and I think we're going to continue to see that. I mean, the public is asking for that, and as long as the knowledge and some funds are available to implement these changes, we're going to continue to see growth in that area.
This next question is, what outreach is there to include historically disadvantaged communities in this sector?
From a policy standpoint, this segment could absolutely be a tremendous bridge there. One of the other things that we as an organization are working on, Representative Paula Hicks Hudson from Toledo has a piece of legislation that would promote a pilot program to create an urban agriculture program here in Ohio, and to raise awareness in urban communities about the ability for them to, for people who come from that background to be involved in agriculture. And so I see where a lot of these types of facilities, controlled environment facilities being located, are going to be in proximity, I think, to some of our urban sectors. And so you combine policies like that with what Representative Hicks Hudson's trying to achieve with awareness building and education, and just exposing young people from urban backgrounds to opportunities in agriculture. And as we've talked about, we think a lot of young people who are just interested in the field of technology are going to be pulled into this. So I absolutely think that this, a controlled environment type of the segment of controlled environment agriculture can be a perfect place to build that bridge for sure.
I have a question here specifically for Dr. Kubota. Are there specific research projects already planned for the new OSU CEA research facility? And if so, do you know if there's plans to bring research into application in this region?
Yeah, so the facility will be opening end of September. But there are already few projects waiting for that opening. And one of them is actually my own project, which is a propagation of strawberry transplants. Traditionally, strawberry transplants are produced in open field and not necessarily clean plants, while industry is CEA industry is trying to introduce strawberries, and to do that, clean plants are needed. So just to support that direction, we got funding from USDA and doing research on that. And then other researches include like tomato production and then some other things. And then we expect many different research are going to be happening in that greenhouse, and definitely contribute to CEA industries in Ohio and then also beyond.
Wonderful. One more question here. It seems like most agricultural policies benefit large farmers in the food industry, yet many of our healthy foods are readily provided by smaller local farmers. Are there policies in Ohio that specifically benefit local, smaller farmers? Are there any yet that benefit CEA farmers? It goes on to mention there's recently an article in our Cranes Cleveland, our business magazine, that has a farmer quoted as saying it's hard to raise a family just by farming for local markets. What would make this industry more attractive for growth in our region? It's kind of a multi-part question there, and it's for the whole panel.
Yeah, so certainly, I look at the young and beginning farmer tax credit that I talked about earlier. And even with that type of assistance, if you're a young and beginning farmer, most likely you're going to go in at a smaller scale. You're not going to jump into purchasing, for example, a 2,500 acre row crop operation. That is incredibly capital intensive if you don't have a multi-generational farm that's being passed on to you. And so I think one of the things that we were really interested in supporting the concept of creating that young and beginning farmer tax credit is it does, in my mind, help someone who's just getting started in the business, going to start at a little smaller scale and do that, help them achieve that initial investment. I think there are also a number of different programs out there that are focused on, local agricultural markets. So for those who are attending the webinar, if you're not familiar, this is a federal level resource, but absolutely can be used here in Ohio. But the local agricultural market program, that program supports the development and coordination and expansion of the whole direct to producer to consumer market. And it also is focused on helping local and regional food markets and enterprises, which I think tend to be associated with smaller scale operations. So the LAMP is the acronym for it. It's an umbrella program that was created in the 2018 Farm Bill and includes a number of programs underneath that umbrella. Farmers Market Promotion Program, the Local Food Promotion Program, Regional Food Systems Partnership is one of them, and then value-added producer grants, which are specifically for, I think, really applicable to small-scale farming operations where farmer wants to add a value-added production operation component to that farming operation. So if you're not familiar with that, those programs are run through USDA, United States Department of Agriculture, and I think are some really great programs. I was actually just talking to Senator Brown's staff, actually just this morning, about some of those programs, and as senators looking at those closely as we approach the 2023 Farm Bill, trying to do some enhancements and improvements to make those programs even more workable for smaller producers. So that's something we're going to be partnering with him on the policy front. So that's just one example of something that's out there.
I'm going to jump in here. We've got just a minute left, and then Adele is going to take us into the home stretch. But I just want to first thank you all for being here and sharing. What I see is that we've got a lot of work to do. We've got a lot of work to do to identify the needs that would be most relevant for the policy sides to grow this aspect of the business. We need to bring together our higher ed partners, but within the ag space, but also across the different technology specialties. And we need to connect our funding partners, public and private and institutional, to help us put this piece together. But what I find very promising and exciting is how enthusiastic all of you seem to be in seeing this as the future. It is a future that a lot of younger people are seeing as an opportunity in the farming space. And I think a lot of investors as well. It is a way to try and address some of the climate issues, create a safer food supply chain, and so forth. So I just want to sort of speak up at the end here that we invite everybody who's on this call and all of you who are party to it as speakers to join us as we start moving forward and putting together the framework to really build this as a collaborative community effort at building the next level of economic opportunity. So with that, I want to hand it back to Adele to close us out. Thank you.
I just want to thank our speakers, our audience, and our promotional sponsors for not only today, but for joining us along this 6-part series. Please be on the lookout for our email with the winner of today's book, Tech to Table. And if you're interested in getting involved or looking for additional information or to watch one of the previous webinars, you can find that at our website, which is foodinnovationneo.org. But with that, I'll wrap it up and hope everybody has a great weekend.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Talk to you soon.
Bye.
Bye.